had a really dark winter this year. We had barely any sun here in Germany, and it was raining pretty much all the time, so naturally I spent most of my time indoors. And even though that can be nice as well, I'm really looking forward to finally spending time outdoors again. And now that the days are finally getting longer again, I really wanted to paint something joyful and colorful. Lately, I'm really drawn to these kind of ornamental borders you often see in Golden Age illustrations. They just bring such a cool, experimental extra layer to an illustration, and they give you room to explore the meaning and storytelling in an artwork. Originally, I just wanted to paint a simple morning landscape scene, but with the added border elements, it almost becomes a whole new story where you can really piece all the different elements together yourself. I always struggled with my paintings not feeling detailed or filled out enough. Maybe because I'm a bit impatient, but since I started to add these ornamental borders and little details to the frames of my illustrations, that really changed, and now I can't seem to stop myself from adding little things here and there. And that's why I actually vastly underestimated how much time this painting would take me. To be honest, I struggled quite a bit with this painting. Around halfway in, I decided that the painting looked kind of flat and the colors way too artificial, and that it was just overall bad art. I was really close to giving up. But since I had already put in all the work of tracing the sketch on my expensive watercolor paper, preparing my workspace, setting up the camera and filming everything, I decided to push through and just trust the process, and now I'm really glad that I did. Trusting myself or trusting the process is really not something that comes naturally to me. I constantly question myself and compare myself and judge myself. I think I'm not only doing that with art, but with every part of my life. This tendency is something that often makes my life feel like a constant stop and go. I start to work on something, but then I drop it again because I couldn't instantly achieve the probably very ambitious goal I set myself. That's something I really want to work on this year. I want to actually enjoy the process of making art instead of spending my time chasing after gold. That's actually kind of the reason why I pretty much stopped painting digitally. I just don't enjoy it as much as painting with actual paint on paper. I really love how some digital artworks look, and it's kind of sad that I can't imitate everything with traditional media. But why paint in the first place if you don't enjoy it? Of course, it's a wonderful thing to be proud of your art and your achievements, but for me that's only half of it. I want to enjoy the endless hours I spend hunched over my desk like a little art goblin. And if the way to do that is by being broke all the time from buying expensive art supplies, making a mess and never having the option of an undo button, then so be it. I just really like feeling the texture of the paint on paper and all the little brush marks, and mixing the paint and see the growing stack of artwork scattered in my room. And it makes me feel more connected to all of my childhood books and movies. There's just something so special about imperfect handmade stuff. That doesn't mean that I'm never frustrated or that I love 100% of the painting process. But I'm trying, and painting traditionally really helps me with that. So for this painting, that meant taking a deep breath and trusting that it would end up somewhat good and just see where it would take me. I did do some planning beforehand, and I had a color key prepared to reference throughout the painting. I wanted a kind of soft morning sky and overall warm colors, but still keep a somewhat fresh and wintry look for the whole painting. I don't know if I succeeded with that. I always tend to make my paintings a bit too warm because I use a lot of yellow ochre and indigo and warm reds for my color mixing. As soon as I started to paint these twisting leaves and vines and branches in the bottom half of the painting, I knew that it would take forever to finish this piece. I really wanted to keep to my original sketch and not cover up too much of it with paint, but in hindsight I feel like I just made things difficult for myself because I had to paint every layer several times while still trying to save all the fine lines that I had painted previously. I was inspired by the absolute mass of blackberry brambles that grow everywhere around here, and I also added these red berries that I think are wild roses or part of wild roses. I see them all the time on my walks. I think they add a really nice warm color contrast to all the green and blue tones in the painting. I said that I wanted to paint more with traditional media this year, but another thing I really want to try to do more of this year is collages and miniatures. I started to experiment more with other creative outlets besides illustrations over the last year or so. For example, I built 2 miniatures from scratch out of cardboard and lots of hot glue, and I think those were some of the most satisfying projects I ever made, so I definitely want to do more of those, and I have already a lot of ideas for that. But I think there's this notion that you have to find your quote-unquote niche and stick with it, that you have to focus on only one thing to be really good at it and find success, especially when posting to social media. You have to be either really good at world building or at character design, or you have to be the best watercolor landscape painter, or you have to specialize in making Lord of the Rings miniatures. But you shouldn't mix these things so you don't confuse people. And I'm sure that there's some truth to it in regards to commercial success. But I don't think life should always be about commercial success and portfolio work and stuff. I mean, why be an artist if you don't allow yourself to explore and experiment, even if it doesn't fit your quote-unquote aesthetic? And I feel like that was a really limiting thought for me on my creative journey, and it kind of still is. The thought that I can only do one thing and therefore have to choose the best possible thing is really stressing me out sometimes. I just like to do and make a lot of different things. And maybe that's just okay. Maybe this year I can allow myself to trust the process and just like and make different things and just see where it takes me. After taking a break to feed the chickens and walk the dogs, I came back to my painting with fresh eyes and thankfully started to think that it maybe wouldn't turn out so bad after all. I still had to paint all the tiny things I put in these little squares for the frame. I included a lot of things that were just really present in my life this winter. A lot of tea and art and dreaming about moody forests I'd like to visit. Lots of bird watching in our garden. Exciting stuff, I know. And the night sky and the stars everywhere are kind of my fill-in for the fantasy books I basically lived in over the past few months. At this point, I felt that I had pretty much pushed through all of the difficult parts with this painting and could just relax with filling in the rest. I had to paint over a lot of areas a few times until the colors looked just right. In some areas they turned out too bright and looked almost a bit plasticky, and in some areas they were too muted and made the painting look muddy in parts. I think that's my biggest struggle with gouache. That and getting the consistency right. I feel like with gouache there's this sweet spot where the paint sinks into the paper texture without losing its opaqueness and vibrancy, but it's really hard to get right for me. But a lot of these things were solved by just pausing and trying out colors on some scrap paper and then reworking some parts of the painting with a lot of patience. The painting now still looks different than how I had imagined and planned it, but I like it anyways. It sort of developed a life of its own somewhere along the way, and that's a really cool thing about traditional art as well. It all turned out fine in the end. The last finishing touch was adding a golden border to the frame, and then it was suddenly all done. It's scary to work on something, not knowing if it's going to turn out bad. But you never know until you just sit down and make it. It's still a hard thing for me to do without panicking, but I'm determined to try, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay as well. I decided to name this painting Beginnings because it feels like a fresh start and new possibilities.